Hi, in this demonstration, I'm going to take you through a day in the life of a tester using Parasoft's Continuous Quality Platform. Before we get started, I want to give you an overview of testing strategy. At Parasoft, we are aligned to the testing pyramid. The testing pyramid is all about how many tests of which types you should be building at each layer. You can see here on the right-hand side, we focus strongly on the bottom of the test pyramid, which is static code analysis to scan code sources, looking for code that can lead to bad practice. This is a great way to identify defects early. Moving up a level, unit testing is a process of creating tests against the actual code, the classes, and the methods. Looking at the top three layers of the pyramid, you have API testing, automated UI testing, manual testing, and another component that spans these layers in the testing practice, which is service virtualization. The ability to simulate test environments and create virtual services to stabilize those test environments. I'll show you some capabilities to rapidly build those virtual services. Very well then, let's get started. Here is an overview of what I'm going to take you through today. You might notice this particular overview is a big circle. That's because it's intended to be comprehensive of a process that is iterative in nature, bringing you back home to begin again to ensure full end-to-end testing. So let's wipe the slate clean and begin with requirements, recording, and generating intelligent tests from those recordings using Parasoft's AI-driven Smart API technology. A key part of building a successful testing practice is in aligning that testing practice to metrics such as code coverage, requirements coverage, and API coverage. So in the Parasoft solution, you start with the requirements. I'm working with Jira, and Parasoft technology allows you to import those requirements into your testing tool so that you're working with the current user stories that you're trying to validate. You're building tests against those requirements. Now, when it comes time to building a test, there are many techniques. You traditionally would start with building use cases against the UI, but actually a much better place to start is the APIs being used by your application. The API is the machine-to-machine communication, and if you're building a UI on top of the application, they represent the underlying mechanics that are gathering the data for your UI. So I prefer to start here at the API layer. And the Parasoft technology allows you to record interactions with the user interface and convert those with AI into API tests. Parasoft has a plugin for the Chrome browser that allows you to record your scenarios by going through the actual use case and from that create a UI test, an API test, or both. When I speak of using AI for test creation, it works like this. Once the actual traffic is observed, the AI will look for patterns and relationships in the different API calls. It will construct meaningful API test scenarios that emulate what the user was doing as they were interfacing with the user interface. From this, the Parasoft solution will create rich codeless API tests that you can then run as is in association with the requirement. Or you could expand upon them and create other types of scenarios. But you have a greater understanding of what those APIs are because you're modeling them against the actual use case that you recorded. We take this a step beyond with machine learning. Parasoft allows you to create smart test templates. These test templates store additional rules that you can train into the tool to help you build better tests through observation. The result is the more that you use the solution, the smarter the tests become. Back to our overview, I'd now like to introduce you to our native API security penetration testing. And now that we've focused strongly on the importance of API testing, I'll touch on UI testing using Selenium and its ability to enable Selenium tests to self-heal. I'll then demonstrate how you can use your API tests and convert your UI tests to use them in a performance testing capacity with Parasoft Load Test. With Parasoft's 30-plus year history in test automation, we saw a need for change and led the charge to the focus on the importance of API testing. Today, there's a new need, shifting left API security testing to remove silos in the we versus them organization paradigm. Security should be everyone's concern. Parasoft gives development teams the ability to address security from the start of the SDLC by adding penetration testing to functional API tests with full reporting that provides information to find and fix vulnerabilities when they're easiest and the least expensive to fix. By combining these different technologies into a scenario and aligning that to the requirements, you can build a broad set of meaningful API tests and validate that critical middleware. Now let's move up the pyramid. Remember back when I showed you that recorder? The recorder also has the ability to create UI tests, and now these UI tests that we're recording are using the best possible locators. Frequently, locators and maintainability are a huge problem when it comes to UI testing because application interfaces change constantly. You spend a lot of time repairing those UI tests after that change. These UI tests that are created are not generated in some special proprietary vendor interface. We create them in Selenium using our Parasoft Selenium solution. As you'll see, these tests are written in Java using frameworks such as JUnit or TestNG, and this is a pure Selenium test that you can run as is with no vendor lock. To make these tests more maintainable and to enhance your existing Selenium practice, the Parasoft technology performs self-healing at runtime and also gives recommendations as the test is executing. We identify that something has changed or something has broken. And this can create a maintainable, automated UI testing practice on top of your testing pyramid. There is additional capability that's built into this technology, such as the performance benchmarking, which helps you understand if your Selenium tests are slowing down and where you might have potential performance bottlenecks. This helps you identify potential performance testing targets. If you identify a performance bottleneck in a particular application, you want to connect that to those API tests. You can use the ones that were previously created, or you could convert new Selenium recordings into new API tests. And once you have your API tests, you can run these as load tests. The Parasoft Continuous Quality Platform includes a performance testing solution that allows you to run these performance tests as part of your daily performance work by shifting left that exercise into the QA realm. You can also run these in an automated way, but we'll talk more about that as we move forward. And on our overview again, I'll introduce the power of virtualization using Parasoft Virtualize. And after we've virtualized assets, I'll show you how to manage your test environments and cover useful functionality in CTP. I'll then touch on our test data management product. Once you've established a broad practice of automated UI testing and automated API testing, and you feel confident that you're covering all of those interfaces of your application, the next thing that you should look at are the back-end systems. When it comes to doing automated testing against our systems, we often forget that our applications are just made up of a series of internal and external systems or APIs. Those systems may belong to us, but in most cases, especially in service-oriented architectures, they do not. If any of the systems are misbehaving, then we can't test our application as a whole. And this is where service virtualization comes in. Service virtualization allows us to simulate the responses that come from back-end systems. We can then use these services in our testing practice and test anytime, anywhere. Parasoft makes this a reality through Parasoft Virtualize, our service virtualization solution. With Parasoft Virtualize, you first start by creating a diagram so that you understand the endpoints, the UIs, and the different systems involved in your testing. And then through recording, you can create simulated representations of those back-end systems. This is very similar to the reconstruction that you saw during the Smart API test generation. We look for patterns and relationships in request-response pairs, and we automatically correlate these to each other so that you can achieve different responses depending upon the type of information that you send in. And it's not just simple SOAP and REST. You can simulate over 120 message formats and protocols that you can know whatever type of technology you're dealing with inside of the system. You can create a virtual service that performs like the real thing. Those services can then be orchestrated using that same environment diagram that you created before. You can use this to swap in different types of services and change their data behavior to support positive, negative, or unexpected behavior. You can also deploy the service by redirecting traffic without having to redeploy the application. Now, one thing that becomes really important when you start talking about holistically testing applications and environments is the test data. Many environments become untestable, not because of service outages, but rather because those systems do not have the data that you need or expect. And Parasoft provides a test data management architecture that allows you to automatically build models from any of the recorded traffic. You can then dive into each of these models, and you can create rules for generating new data. You could generate that data on the fly or as part of an automated process. Put it into your test cases and your virtual services and feel confident that you have the necessary data to test effectively. Now, all of this can be automated and run continuously. This entire system, the tests, the performance profiles, generated test data, and the automatic deploying virtual services, this can all be done as an integrated part of your CI/CD or DevOps pipeline. Inside of the pipeline, you'll find a series of plugins that allow you to choose the different types of tests and environment configurations that you want to run. Simply choose those, and then every time that the code checks in, the application gets built, deploys the proper environment, runs the tests, and then delivers the results back into the Parasoft ecosystem or back into the build system to pass or fail the build. And last on our overview, we'll push reports and data to DTP where you can get a full perspective of the current state of your testing. And I'll finish off showing you some powerful tools to supercharge your testing process. Parasoft Development Testing Platform, or Parasoft DTP, provides multi-layered interactive dashboards that allow you to see the results of your tests and allows you to see which requirements those tests are correlated with. It allows you to correlate coverage information so that you can understand both functionally and non-functionally how those applications are being tested. But are you covering a sufficient amount of code? All this information comes together to give you a high-level, highly interactable view on the continuous quality of your application. The last thing I want to cover is change. Many testing practices fall apart when it comes to handling change. Identifying, remediating, and acting upon change becomes critical enablers of your testing practices. Parasoft has many techniques to help overcome the challenges associated with change, starting with the UI tests. Earlier I mentioned self-healing and recommendations. Those are based on change. If during the UI test execution, the test senses application change, the AI kicks in to help you understand what those changes mean from a testing perspective. Those tests can then be updated so that your new UI tests will work against the new versions of the application. Those recommendations are delivered back into the IDE so that testers can make those changes in the code. When it comes to API change, we have a similar workflow. Parasoft Change Advisor is an AI-powered solution that monitors API definitions, and if any of those API definitions were to change, it creates a change template to help you understand the difference between multiple versions of the application so you can make any needed updates. And finally, what about code change? Code change indicates that something about the application is different than it was in the previous build. Parasoft has technology known as Smart Test Execution, which enables you to re-execute test cases that are associated with the sections of code that have changed. We do this in a couple of ways, by scanning code services and also through something called binary analysis. With binary analysis, you simply point at the new WAR file or the new jar file, and the solution will tell you what changed from a code perspective. And because we've mapped the individual API tests and UI tests to the code, we can automatically rerun only the tests that are affected by change. This subset of tests can be run much faster than the full test suite when you only need to verify a portion of the application. This also significantly reduces the amount of time you spend looking through results because you're only looking at those tests that were affected by the change. And from that, you would then review the results and understand the priority as associated to those original requirements, which brings you full circle back to where you started. Through this iterative and continuous process, you have a complete end-to-end testing solution for all of your functional needs. Back on our overview, we've come full circle. I promised I'd bring you home again to begin our iterative testing process again using Parasoft's Continuous Quality Platform. Contact Parasoft to learn more about how you can optimize your software test automation to produce high-quality applications.
Awesome. So now let's bring on Jeff. Jeff is a senior product manager at Parasoft, working in our functional test platform, and with him we've got Gregory, who's been at Parasoft for a few years now, helping people do actual, solve real problems. So we're going to take your questions, and whatever you want to ask, now's the time, and we'll get people involved. One of the questions that had come up is, in a microservices architecture, is there unit testing for UI? Is there a possibility of virtualizing contract testing? I know it's kind of a big maybe set of questions there, but what do you think?
My thoughts are that absolutely, especially with when we saw with the test impact analysis, because a contract testing is basically limiting your testing to just a contract between two separate systems or two separate microservices. And so much like we saw with the change test impact analysis in the change section of the demo, that it's not contract testing may not be as effective as end-to-end, but you can actually absolutely test just what's between two contracts with test impact analysis. You see, it'll just test what changed. Gregory, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And generally in a microservices architecture, and you look at the UI, that generally represents some complex orchestrated sequence of back-end calls, your microservices calls, various multi-service logic. So, the UI renders that data constructed by those services, and so when testing UI, you can isolate individual components, but generally speaking, the goal is to validate, some end user experience, right? And that as an end-to-end flow is probably a little bit more valuable than testing individual components. Additionally, probably a more scalable and effective approach would be then to develop component tests and contract tests, and you can refer to some of those as unit tests for individual microservice APIs, right? So when you do that, those tests are a little bit more targeted against those services, and then will enable you to identify and remediate defects faster than identifying those unit defects at the UI level. And as far as virtualizing contract testing, absolutely. In fact, you start looking at choreographed microservice architectures. Again, you're essentially looking, even if you're looking at a JSON payload or you're looking at a contract, you're essentially, you might think it's just two services, right? But at the end of the day, it does require the rest of the plumbing. It does require the rest of the system being up and running in order to truly do these types of tests. And so if that plumbing is not available to enable you to synthesize that contract, You have to look at accessibility limitations, behavioral limitations, costs, so on and so forth, and that's where service virtualization can really enable you.
Excellent. So another question we have is, can I use API testing for performance testing?
Yes, and I mentioned that in the video, but it was really quick. But yeah, your UI tests created in Selenium then has the ability to transform those into API tests, and then those TST files that those tests are stored in, those are completely compatible with our load test product. So that would be the compatibility with performance testing.
So, reuse of those test assets for load and performance is just super efficient. Grigori, you look like you're chomping at the bit there.
Well, I get excited about these things. So, so what's really nice about being able to leverage your API tests for performance testing as well is that when you do get to that level of maturity, when you are creating API tests, you're typically, again, you're modeling different user stories, different user experiences within your application. So when you translate that into load and performance testing, you can actually take advantage of the fact that you have all of these user stories, all these different end-to-end flows built out, and you can really simulate a realistic consumption of your application. So let's say you're e-commerce website or some kind of retail website or bookstore or something. You have different types of users, right? Users who will actually purchase books in your bookstores, or purchase t-shirts, whatever, right? And then you have users who are just browsing, and then you have users who are maybe saving items for later, right? And so if you're doing a stress test, you want to be able to simulate different types of users. You want to be able to assign weighted profiles, and then actually even change that behavior at some point, right? Simulate some sort of spike in activity from a certain type of user, while other users are still flooding your application. So having a test suite and a test bed of API tests is really an enabler for doing comprehensive and complete load and performance testing.
And there was kind of a related question that just popped up in the box about reusing the functional tests for security.
Right.
That's a good one.
We've just recently implemented native API security integration, API testing security integration with OWASP Zap. And so, yeah, we have the ability to add penetration testing directly to our functional tests that were done, created for originally by the QA folks. It can now be used again by the AppSec people.
Yeah, so another great reuse model there, right? Like one set of user stories, and then let's pound them for load and performance, and let's pound them for security, right? It's a very, very efficient model. Let's see. How do I know when I'm done testing? When you ran out of time. No.
Wasn't George Lucas or something saying the movie's never finished until but
blue screen of death?
Yeah, basically the testing has to be, it's an iterative process that's continuous. And meanwhile, you're measuring that with your code coverage and with your modified code coverage, with your API coverage, and as well as traceability. And so I guess it's finished whenever you declare that those numbers are high enough to meet whatever production deadline we have, and what risk you're willing to accept.
Not to start an argument here, but I would argue you're never finished, right? I mean, as long as your application, as long as developers are introducing new features, as long as there's an iterative process to the application, you're always testing something, right? There's always something new to test. And when you take a step back, it's really about giving your developers confidence, about giving the teams confidence that introducing changes to the code, introducing new features to the code aren't going to break existing functionality, that it will deliver on the business requirements set forth, right? And so in that context, absolutely, all the things that you mentioned, right? Things like code coverage, things like requirements coverage, test coverage, modified code coverage. All of these different metrics can provide you a quality snapshot of your application within sort of a historical context. And that is where you start to find confidence that that new changes aren't going to break anything, because there are testing practices in place, and there's metrics in place to
Yeah,
support
I'd
that.
say I might reword the question myself if I was asking it not into when am I done, because obviously I'm not done, but when can I be comfortable that it's okay for me to release this, right? That it's good enough for my criteria. And that's really in the continuous world, that is the question. And in a, you know, a dream world of really well executed continuous, it's a decision that hopefully my test suite, my pipeline can answer for me, right? It's not, okay, now call Grigori and ask him if it's okay. Now call Jeff and ask him if it's okay. And now call Arthur and ask him if it's okay. That's a tough process, right? Like, I want the thing to fly as much as possible out there, you know, automated. And we see lots of people are actually succeeding at this, right? So it's pretty fascinating.
And we definitely apply, we provide the tools to give them that answer as close as they can get it with the different metrics.
Yeah. One other question I think is interesting, and then we'll wrap it up, is when the developer starts, you know, making changes, fixes, enhancements, et cetera, doesn't that break all these API tests?
It has the potential to break those API tests, and so that's why you've got Change Advisor. That's why you've got test impact analysis. So, for instance, with test impact analysis, it takes you right, because it only ran the test for what changed. It helps you find it much faster in order to resolve the issue. And Change Advisor points out, this is where this API is different from that one. And those are very good tools to stop any impact from those API tests breaking.
Yeah, and you know, I would also add that, yeah, absolutely. It may break those API tests. It may not, but at the end of the day, you know, that's why we're always going to have manual testing still, right? That's why at the top of the pyramid, we're always going to see manual testing, because testing changes from sprint to sprint. You know, that's essentially the first thing that happens. That's your first line of defense, is a manual test to validate these changes. The trick is to being able to then automate those as quickly as possible, or maintain your existing tests, or update your existing tests. So so different tools, right? All the things that we've listed, things like Change Advisor will help you refactor your API tests with the change template based on your specifications, or based on your documentation, in a quick automated way, detecting how changes to the application have actually impacted the test, right? Do I have to update my full complete test suite of API tests against all these different services, or do I just need to update some namespaces, you know, for a few operations? So being able to identify how those changes are impacting the test, and then having automated processes in place to update those tests, will allow you to bring those tests into your next sprint as quickly as possible. But chances are, initially, you might have to do a little manual testing to start.
Getting it right. Well, thanks guys very much. Appreciate your time. I'm going to share my screen here now. And in theory, it will show the right screen. In practice, you should be seeing the.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Arthur.
Yeah, thanks. So before everybody jumps off too fast, I do want to make like a super secret announcement here that we are going to do a quickie bonus session after I do this slide. So, you know, feel free to stick around. We had one really intriguing question come up, and it was kind of late in the cycle for the speaker, and there's so many people that could speak to it that we're just going to grab any panelist who wants to talk after I finish up here. And we're just going to discuss this topic about AI testing and human testing. So feel free to stick around for our special secret bonus content. Okay, so other than that, you know, we thank you all for joining us today. We thank all the speakers for being part of this, the panelists for helping share the information that they had. There is a survey coming out, and if you fill out the survey, you got a chance to win a pretty big Amazon gift card. If you want to try any of this stuff, hit that little QR code or hit the link and go check out the demo. Reminder, you will get the slides. You will get a link to watch video on demand that you can also share with, friends and family, and, give people a Christmas gift, right? Watch this video. No, but seriously, you will get all of that usual stuff at the end of this. So that'll be great. And like to, again, just thank all those people who took their time out to share their knowledge. And, we have another session coming up in the spring, early in the spring, and it'll be more focused on software security, software reliability, software safety, and about the, focus on development. So if you'd like to join that, that's great. If you'd like to be part of that, if you'd like to speak at one of our events, if you'd like to share your story, please reach out to us, and we'd love to hear your story and share it with others as well. I'd also like to thank the entire team here at Parasoft, the marketing team, especially Joy and Erica, who've worked for many, many, many weeks to put this event together. It's a bit daunting when you do it, but I feel like it's really worth it. We've all heard some really great things today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to invite Igor and other panelists who would like to turn your camera back on. And again, any of you panelists, even, not Parasoft or Parasoft, like there was a question came up, and I'm just going to read it here, right? Which is, given the keynote, and as we continue in a more automated testing space, including AI assistive testing, where does that leave the human tester? Especially the mention that John did of manual testing for the security tester. Should the human tester's focal point be on the creative side of software testing, like exploratory testing, with an accompanying attention to validating or verifying automated or AI tasks? So, yeah, Igor, I'm going to give you first crack. John, I was hoping you would join us, John, right? But
yeah, I was just hanging out.
Igor, take
guys. I
take a shot, Igor.
Yeah, that's perfect questions. I do strongly believe in human creativity, right? And when it comes to testing, and as John pointed out, there's a lot of situations when kind of goes beyond just routine execution of your tests, which you want to automate because you want to remove those manual procedures. And yes, AI drives us to this creativity and ability to actually be human enough and hopefully smarter to discover new ways of test applications. But honestly, we're not there yet, and there still probably will be some specific patterns of executions which really humans' creativity will be key factor. So yes, exploratory testing probably would be the most applicable way of how manual testers can apply themselves on top of verification that what was tested from AI perspective still covers all required areas.
So John, you kind of helped trigger this thing with your, manual has to be part of it. And I think in your case, like you made a really strong justification for something that a script wouldn't have done, partly just because of the creativity involved and partly because, the automation does exactly what it's programmed to do and it won't change anything. That's what it's always going to do.
Right. I mean, when you start to look at like application logic and, the flow of an application, I mean, that's not necessarily going to get, checked by, the normal scanning tools. I mean, I hope that one day that we have something that is that robust, but I don't think we're at that point yet. So, and even once we feel like we've reached that point, I think that there will be a period of time where we're going to be wanting to even have the human involved at some point, right? To just make sure that you don't have those, hey, it looked good on paper, but then when it actually got implemented, it didn't, it wasn't what we expected, right? And I've seen that a number of times, and I'm using tools like Burp Suite Pro and whatnot that lets me kind of like do some scripting, capture all those requests, and then repeat them. And to SOA test, I did use that on a recent engagement where I was piping the Burp tool through SOA test, and that found some interesting stuff. It really did. So I mean, not every test is going to be the same. So the tools that you use for each test, you kind of have to look at those, and that's where the creativity comes in. You know, what's the right tools for the test? You know, doing a almost call by call analysis of what's going on. And yeah, I mean, being able to put together a larger picture and then bring that in to craft an exploit of some sort, that is where the human can really shine. So yeah, I mean, I would say that don't neglect that. At some point, you know, do a test, see what you get. Do a manual test, I would say.
Yeah, and I think, you know, like I always have this issue that I want my tests to be very consistent, and it's a very tedious job. I obviously don't want stupid testers, and we have this problem, right? That the more clever someone is, the less likely they are to do good, tedious, repetitive work, right? They get
Right.
bored, they get sloppy. And so I think about a, you know, tedium forward strategy, right? Like anything that's repetitive, get that stuff automated, get it out of the way, because I
Yeah.
want to free the human up to have the time. I don't want the human thinking about, let me make sure I have a, you know, specific test for every authentication method in the API. I want them to think about, okay, I know all that's covered. How can I get in? I want them to do the clever thing.
Well, to that point too, I mean, we're in a labor crunch right now. I mean, it's not just in our industry, it's kind of across the board, you know, I mean, just the economy in general. And, you know, we're trying to take the people that we have and do more with less, right? You know, we'll take those people and enhance their productivity as much as we can. And, you know, even outside of the application security space, you know, network security and things like that, I mean, we're introducing a lot more tools in that regard too, to try to make, you know, our, like you're saying, those more tedious parts of a test to get, you know, get those automated. We'll still report on them, but let's get the humans focused on the stuff that only humans can do, right?
Yeah.
And I think
Or-
AI-driven approach is not as much as to replace human beings, but actually add additional test practices or test interface, which are very difficult for humans to actually do. It's data mining, right? It's trying to detect those patterns, observing like huge traffic, and try to find something that for human, it just, because calculation power is just not enough. So machines learning algorithm probably will be a perfect example where they can solve those problems, adding on top of what we can do.
Yeah. Grigori, did you have something you wanted to? I think your mic is off.
Yeah, just you know, to really, yeah, confirm everything that's already been said. I mean, you know, you look at the state of AI, it's really good at doing a lot of good things and automating repetitive tasks that we typically want to, you know, we want to automate, but you still need that out of the box type thinking. You know, even your, you know, even a Roomba, you know, can't go through stairs, for example, right, and vacuum stairs at this point, and you know, you still have to do that, right? So absolutely, manual testing isn't going anywhere with AI testing. As a matter of fact, we need it more
You
than
know, I
ever.
feel like this is, you know, not an official Parasoft phrase or charter, right? But having been here for nearly 30 years, like one of our driving philosophies is, you know, to make development chill again, right? Like, and by that I mean, let's get rid of the annoying repetitive tasks, right? Like anything the computer can do well, it should do for you, so that you can do the stuff that's interesting. Because most developers and testers like challenging tasks. They enjoy them far more than tedious tasks. And so that is like core to our philosophy, and has been for many, many decades, is not about like, let's see if we can replace people. It's like, can we free them from the drudgery, right? And that's really where I always try to drive what are we doing and how do we help people. And I think it's fascinating, because humans have this uncanny nature to find weird things, to recognize weird patterns, and you know, like in a good tester, to break things, which is exactly what you need. So I appreciated everybody. Thanks for your input there. Once again, to all the attendees, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, the links are up here on the screen. Other hand, you know, like click for a demo, come watch other videos. If you've got topic suggestions, things you want to hear, feel free to let us know, and we look forward to seeing you at future sessions. And with that, we're going to call it a day. Thanks, everybody.